case you couldn't tell, a very special Patrick Christie's tonight. We've got the studio audience in, and I can't wait to hear from them in just a few moments' time. But now, it was the most hotly anticipated budget in UK political history, arguably, and it marked Labour's first budget in 14 years. But before we delve into the details of it, should we just remind ourselves of what the Prime Minister promised during the election campaign?
No tax rises in the next Parliament.
No tax rises needed in the plans in our manifesto.
In the plans?
No tax rises for working people. That's income tax, national insurance
so you're
and VAT.
not ruling out...
Crystal clear. So, despite that pledge from the Prime Minister, the Chancellor did today announce the biggest tax rises since 1993.
The scale and seriousness of the situation that we have inherited cannot be underestimated. Together, the hole in our public finances this year, which recurs every year, the compensation schemes that they did not fund, and their failure to assess the scale of the challenges facing our public services means that this budget raises taxes by £40 billion.
Right, OK, so did Keir Starmer lie to the nation? Do you feel lied to? Or do you feel better or worse off? There are some winners in this budget. We'll talk about all of this. There are obviously some losers. I mean, the same goes for any budget. I'm joined now by my wonderful political panel. We've got the Labour MP for Loughborough. We've got Jivan Sander, the federal board member for the Liberal Democrats, Callum Robertson, Reform UK chairman Zia Youssef, and the Conservative MP for Rayleigh and Wickford, Mark Francois. Now, just before I go to my audience, I think it would be a bit silly if I didn't just get a very quick synopsis from each of you about how you feel that budget's gone. I'll start with you. I'm assuming you're quite pleased with it.
Yeah, the first Labour budget for 15 years. Look, I was hopeful and excited for the budget, and now afterwards I'm incredibly pleased we start to rebuild prosperity in this country. Building for growth, so wages start to rise again, investing in our schools, which are crumbling, where half of them, of course, don't have specialist maths teachers. And those of you who can't get hospital appointments, there's a lot more investment for the NHS. Because when 3 million are out of work because they're too sick, it's clear those services need investment. Today, as we start to rebuild this country, I'm very pleased to be part of it, because this is about more than services, it's about hope. I know it's been a long time since we've had hope in this country. I'm 34 and I've never known a growing economy. Today is that we set this economy, this country on the right path. I'm really proud to be part of this Labour government.
All right, good start. Mark, I'll just go to you. I imagine you have probably the polar opposite view, do you?
Well, look, the BBC 6... Can I mention the BBC News? The BBC 6 o'clock news said today that this was the biggest tax-rising budget in history. And let's go back to what Rachel Reeves said on the 28th of May, 1 week into the general election. And I've got the quote here because I wanted to get it right. She said in a big speech on the economy, I quote, "Every Labour policy will be fully funded and fully costed, no ifs and no ands and no buts." And she went on to say there will be no additional tax rises. Then the same lady stood up in the House of Commons this afternoon, I was there, and announced £40 billion of tax increases and a massive increase in government borrowing. So let's call this what it is. Okay. It's a budget of broken promises. You were deceived.
OK, all right. I'll just go to you quickly on this here. What's your take on that budget?
Well, if you're watching this at home and you work in the private sector and you work hard, and year after year it feels like your wages never seem to increase as much as your cost of living does, then make no mistake, this Labour budget is going to make you poorer still. And it is the decisions that this Labour government is making in terms of giving inflation-busting bumper pay rises to their paymasters at the trade unions. So if you're a train driver, you're getting a 25% pay rise. If you're an employee at the failing Home Office, you know, a Home Office that has failed on small boats, that has failed on law and order, that has failed on asylum, they're getting 9% pay rises. So has your pay increased by such an amount? And what's happening is the private sector is getting soaked. We're seeing a massive increase on taxes on hard-working British people. Labour did lie. I just want to make the point. Right. It is absolutely a lie that taxes on hard-working people are not going up. The OBR themselves have said 3/4 of the NIC employers' contribution increases are going to go straight through to real wages for hard-working people.
Thank you for that. I'll round us off then, Callum. What's the message from the Lib Dems on this Rachel Reeves budget then?
The goal of politics and politicians, and I know we're not a popular breed in the country, is to make life better for working people. That is our job, that is our responsibility. This budget fails to do that. This budget, with freezing income tax thresholds, means every year from now until 2029, working class people like yourselves, like the people watching at home, and middle class people, people setting up small businesses, will be paying more in income tax than they have been before. And that's not good enough. It's letting down you and it's letting down the country. Keir Starmer had 2 jobs with this budget. One was not to spook the markets, and the second one was to deliver on the change he promised. Yes, the markets have survived. The markets are broadly fine after today. But actually, no, he hasn't delivered that change he promised, and he's not set us on the first course to begin that course and chart that course for change. OK.
All right, Julian, I'll let you... There's a lot of you to come back there, mate, so I will let you do it. But I'd just like to go to the audience first. So why not? Why not take us away? So just you know, say what you like with him.
This was sold to us as a budget of growth, and we're now on what is the 3rd socialist government on the trot. And what I see is what's written on the tin, a socialist tin. We are going to see growth, but we're going to see growth in debt, and we're going to see growth in tax. And they are actually harming all the aspects of our economy where growth would come from. I can't wait for the next 4 years to end so we can get some proper administration in place.
OK, right, OK, so that's your verse. Jeevan, yeah, I mean, I think the growth predictions are something like 1.5% over the next 4 years. I mean, it doesn't sound massively ambitious.
So, yeah, I want to pick up on Alan's point. We're investing in our economy and our clean energy to get growth in this country. The reason why we know this can work, is we're already seeing it work in the United States, the fastest growing economy in the G7. If you would let me finish, please, Alan. When we had the US economy in 2021, they invested in their economy. They beat forecasts. Now the US worker, the average US person, $7,500 better off than they were expecting in 2021 because they invested. When businesses cannot get the workers they need because they're too sick, that harms our growth. When kids today are in failing schools, they learn less and they earn less tomorrow. That's why we invested in schools today. And we are working with businesses to get investment in this country. And by the way, before we even started this job today, businesses had a huge faith in this government with £63 billion in investment announced last week. There is a lot more to come and a lot to do.
All right,
It was the fact that they invested in fracking and they got energy from within their country. That is what turned their economy around. We're going down this headlong, crazy exploit of trying to get net zero. All that's going to do is damage us. There's no such thing as green jobs, green energy. It's all rubbish.
Well, OK. All right. Your views, obviously, look, I wouldn't imagine you would take the opposite view. But yes, I could hear you nodding along to... a couple of things there, Mark. What do you make of what our chap here said? You were saying essentially that you don't feel any better off.
I'm not surprised that we are where we are because they were always going to do this. Of course they're going to lie. Of course they're going to tax us to even further than the Tory party did.
All right, Mark. Look, the Tories, this £20-odd billion black hole. This is what Labour have got to do, isn't it, this budget?
The £22 billion black hole is total nonsense. £9 billion of that goes down to the whacking rate pay rise for train drivers and the 22% above inflation pay increase for junior doctors. Those were 2 decisions, whether you agree with them or not, that were taken by the incoming Labour government. It's 2 of the first decisions they took. So to say they turned over a rock and found a £22 billion black hole that we'd bequeathed them, when £9 billion of that was down to the Labour Party, is palpably nonsense. And Rachel Reeves, in the Commons today, I was there, stood up and said the OBR had published a document that gave that whole £22 billion breakdown in detail. That's what she told the Commons. That's not true. They didn't publish a document that stood up the £22 billion black hole. Now, call me old-fashioned, but you're not supposed to tell fibs in the House of Commons. Right. And Rachel Reeves has got a lot of questions to answer in the morning.
OK. If I may quickly.
Yep.
Rachel did not say that.
She did. I was there.
Rachel said...
I was there.
Rachel
now we're on. Now we've got it going. There we go.
I heard her say
it. Took a few minutes, but we're into it now.
Where were you? Were you in the tea room? I was in the chamber.
Rachel said that we would publish it in due course. So, yes, the £22 billion document, line by line, will be coming out in the future. And similarly, when you talk about the OBR quote, she'll about the same thing. So, no, it's not true to say that Rachel said there is a document now. Rachel said the document is coming. I was in the chamber too, Mark.
The OBR, she said the OBR had stood up the £22 billion black hole.
The quote she said, first of all, she did say, by the way, the OBR themselves have said they discovered a huge overspend. They said it in July. They said it again now. Right. Absolutely, there will be a document coming out in due course, Mark. So, no, it's not true to say that Rachel said that today.
All right, guys, put a pin in it for now, but, you know, we'll reload in a minute. But I just want to see what point you want to make, and then we'll put this to Sia and Callum.
It's a slight change of subject, but it's really a simple question. There was great play made about the working person during the election campaign, and today we heard a lot about the working person, to the extent where, of course, they put up the minimum living wage yesterday. Now, I just did a little bit of arithmetic and worked out that if somebody's on that wage and does a 40-hour week, that would give them an income of just over £25,000 a year. Now, considering that is what's considered then to be the minimum for a working person to live on, how is it acceptable for pensioners? My state pension works out at just over £11,900 a year. So a working person must have £12.21 an hour, but I got to live on just under £12,000 a year.
Yeah, just on that, I've got it in my notes here somewhere about pensions. I'll keep to get your view on this, right? So, obviously there's been a lot of hoo-ha made about the winter fuel payment. I myself have made quite a lot of hoo-ha about that, actually. But when it comes to pensions, what are you doing? You're raising the pension credit, is that right?
So we're keeping the triple lock. Yeah. And to sort of pick up on that quickly, your state pension was about 12,000, is that correct?
Just under, yeah.
Just under 12,000. If you are a low-income pensioner, pension credit, you get 4,000 on top of that, plus the winter fuel payment. And, of course, as a pensioner, you also like to have lower housing costs, right? So it is true to say you've got countervailing on the other side. And, of course, I assume yourself you probably have a private pension?
But that's nothing to do with it because, I mean, I'm speaking for pensioners. There are many pensioners that do live on the basic state pension.
And they'll also get pension credit as well as, of course, the household support they need.
And it still doesn't bring it up to the level of the basic living wage.
Yeah, of course.
Callum, I'll let you in on this and then I've got to say it.
I have great sympathy with your point. And actually, one of the real losers of this budget is pensioners. And some really key evidence for this is yes, the triple lock is rising up, I think, 4%. And that's great for pensioners in the sense that it's improving income. However, with the personal tax threshold freezing, you're now bringing a load of pensioners with their state pension into paying income tax. You're basically confounding and you're making worse the situation for pensioners having already robbed their winter fuel allowance. It's just not good enough.
So what public service would you like to cut? So you're having less tax revenue, right? So we are keeping the same policy the last Conservative government had on tax threshold. We will then unfreeze them. You're saying that you should absolutely, extend or rather increase the thresholds today. What public service would you like to cut?
I'll have a go at that.
DEI. Cut all the DEI officers.
Well, let's
start Leah Zero because we haven't heard much.
700 million on diversity and equity and inclusion officers inside the civil service. The £12.8 billion of hard-working British taxpayers' money that is sent abroad in overseas aid, when you've just robbed 10 million hard-working British pensioners who are paid into the system their whole lives of their winter fuel allowance to save £1.5 billion. The over £4.3 billion that is being spent on asylum and many cases bogus asylum claims, vast amounts of money. The 25% inflation-busting pay rises being given to train drivers, other members of the public sector who are essentially the paymasters of your leader and your cabinet. There's no excuse for it whatsoever. Every time the British people are told there need to be tough decisions, and by the way, the Tories were as guilty of this as anybody, the tough decisions always, inevitably, are at the expense of British people, hard-working British people who have played by the system, paid into it their whole lives, and come at their expense to the benefit of foreign citizens and cronies inside the leadership. So that's your answers to where you find your saving.
Right, well, it is quite a list.
Well, let's pick up the asylum overspend, by the way. £9 billion, I think, this year. That's why we put in about 300, I think, more caseworkers to deal with. Because, by the way, I would agree, by the way, that no refugee in this country should be in a hotel, right? We should either processing the claims, either people have a right to remain or they should not be here, as simple as that. But what we were left with was about £7 to £8 billion a year being spent. Absolutely, we are investing, by the way, to get that money down. Now, there is a lot of savings and efficiencies we have to do on the other side. We are investing to do that. Part of that is the asylum claim. We also see some more about the NHS. But the truth is, these aren't costless, right? And each time you're thinking about this, there's no magic button or easy solution. You know how hard the past 14 years have been. All of you know how hard it's been. You know how hard it is today. You know when you drive along the road and you see potholes there. You know when you try and get a GP appointment. You know when things aren't getting better. You see how hard things are.
Hang on a minute.
It's going to take a long time for us to fix this. And I'm going to be straight with you guys. It is going to take time.
Okay.
But I'm still really hopeful, right?
All right. OK.
But Labour said repeatedly they wouldn't increase taxes on working people. And then they spent 2 weeks tying themselves up in knots trying to define what a working person was. Well, I have two stamps on it. A working person is someone who's got a job. And that includes somebody who runs a small business and employs other people. I'll have another go at it. A working person is someone who buys their own suits and their own glasses and doesn't have to rely on a Labour billionaire to buy them for them. Right?